You know, I've always been very interested in learning more about the Native Americans. My mama said when she was a little girl, her grandpa used to tell her stories that they used to trade with the natives in this area when they first got here.
For years, fans considered Troy Landry the king of the Louisiana swamp. From the pit of the Atchafalaya Basin wetlands, catching alligators, he made his way to fame.
All right, move your tarp. All right, just good. You got him now.
Yeah, sure.
Look at here, he's coming from deep water.
But while he peddled danger and survived many high-stakes moments on the show Swamp People, his personal life was shattering behind the scenes. It wasn't long before rumors of failing health, volatile relationships, and legal troubles started to float around him, leaving fans with more questions than answers. What really happened to the Alligator King? How have fans reacted to his rumored problems? Join us as we uncover the truth about Troy Landry from Swamp People. The rise of the Swamp King. Troy Landry has been the focal point of one of the most disturbing shows on the History Channel for more than a decade. Swamp People. Battling it out with alligators in the Atchafalaya Basin in Louisiana, he suddenly became a household name. But just before the blinding lights of fame, who exactly was this swamp man? Born to Duffy and Myrtle Landry in 1960, gator hunting was barely a life decision he made from peer pressure as a child. While fans have mostly asked how a man suddenly decides to be in the deadly business of hunting one of nature's biggest predators, Troy was, in fact, raised by it. It wasn't some childhood fantasy that suddenly became his reality. He was, in fact, raised in a family of crocodile hunters, moss peddlers, trappers, and, of course, lumberjacks. Would there even be a Troy without the lumberjacks and the hat? Maybe, but fans have absolutely loved the hat on their Swamp King. Speaking of fan love, when the A&E Network and the History Channel made that spontaneous choice to talk about life in the depths of southern Louisiana, not many people imagined there was much to tell. It was mostly a couple of lumberjack-wearing people who loved the swamp and lived in the bayou. They had a tradition of hunting and culling the crocodile population, and they often resorted to other types of hunting when they tag out during the crocodile hunting seasons. So why would anyone pick an interest in that? While that was the reaction from the get-go, the History Channel decided to give Troy the chance to actually show the world what it meant to live in the bayou and learn to roll an angry 10-foot alligator into a pirogue. Fast forward to August 22, 2010, the History Channel aired the very first episode of Swamp People and held its breath for a reaction. A few weeks after the first episode, the show amassed a whopping viewership of just over 5 million, overtaking the huge series The Deadliest Catch. And Troy was at the center of it all. Imagine a 50-year-old Cajun finding fame at that age. No one saw it coming, not even the network. It was almost like a Christopher Nolan movie, where the unexpected and impossible find a way to mesh into the very fabric of reality. But just as Troy's fame grew, so did the scrutiny. Just how has he been working it all out? Now the world watches. It's not every time a 50-year-old suddenly breaks into the limelight, but as time has proven, when the show is good, and the showrunners are monsters at PR, just maybe 50 isn't even that late now, is it? And Troy Landry's life absolutely shows that. Imagine a simple crocodile hunter who had lived a quiet life in the swamps of Louisiana suddenly having paparazzi following him everywhere he went. That had become his new life, and it was a baptism of PR fire. It wasn't long before he realized that everything had changed. Suddenly, everyone was more interested in the details of his personal life, his marriage, his children, and more importantly, his health. A man in his 50s, who had walked the path of death and danger from childhood, doesn't seem all that far from health problems or two. Or at least that's exactly how his critics saw it. A few years into the show, fans who watched the show religiously often came up with the same review. If it's truly a family business, why not let the kids take charge of the business as he slowly approached his 60s? To most fans, it felt like the right thing to do. It wasn't too hard to see why concerned fans speculated that Troy often appeared pale as the moon, and sometimes even out of breath after a long struggle with an alligator. But how does anyone tell a man who loves what he does to simply let it go? Especially now when he had a chance to show the world just how important his work is in the biological ecosystem. While passion sounded like his motivation to keep going, it wasn't enough for critics, who saw him in an absolutely different light. The rumors were endless, and the narratives were absolutely devastating. For reference, there were claims on social media that the now 66-year-old Troy could not live with suddenly disappearing from the fame he had only recently known. For context, his sons, Jacob, Chase, and his stepson, Brandon, are mainstays on the show, all of whom were younger, stronger, and always ready to pop an alligator out of the water with their hooks ready. It seemed to most people that they mostly did the heavy lifting, and all good old Troy had to do was shoot straight at the alligator before it was dragged into the pirogue. No one could question his fascination with his job or his experience, but during the 12th season of the show, something shifted. Fans began to notice the once super steady legs of their favorite alligator hunter were getting slower. While it wasn't the most obvious change for some fans, critics, who really went fishing for the truth, or at least something close to it, could tell that something had changed. All of his actions fell under a microscope. From the little side steps when he walked to Chase and Jacob, frequently doing the heavy lifting, and the sudden employment of a deckhand like Picklewheat in 2021, Troy, in front of the cameras, had no hiding place. For the first time, he felt what it was really like to be backed into a corner by an external force he couldn't control, almost like he did with the alligators. But what exactly was wrong, and were critics really on to something? On the mend? Troy has often appeared as a down-to-earth country lad who would tell his own story without the usual Hollywood fairy dust sprinkled on it. In his behind-the-scenes interviews, his well-timed sense of humor gave the show a more humane feeling than the necessary evil of seeking out the alligators in their habitats and shooting them down. But beneath all that humility and graceful jokes, he struggled heavily behind the scenes with problems that couldn't be solved even with his rifle. This illusion of a perfect life was starting to break at the seams, and every little spill could no longer be hidden from the public, no matter how he tried. Although he chose not to comment on the health rumors, keeping his cards close to the vest for reasons best known to himself, the criticisms grew louder. Fans had read the signs, connected the dots, and made a working theory about his health deteriorating quickly. However, it wasn't all gloomy. Although the views on the show had surged to biblical levels, he only had to film during the crocodile hunting seasons. The seasons in Louisiana started every first Wednesday in September and lasted for 30 days. So he only really had to be in the view of the camera during the 30 days. While fans had only begun to visibly notice the gingerly movement in his posture and walk, Troy was craftily managing a discomfort in his back. However, he mostly found a way to keep his cool during the season. For the most part, he worked on the show with his kids and caught and culled alligators, but his back continued to pay the price until it couldn't. So, just 2 months after the 12th season had been shot, he stealthily had back surgery. Yet again, he kept his cards close, showing no signs of weakness to the crowd that had watched him cull and skin the hide of an alligator. But just a day after the surgery, the rumors got so tangible about his surgery that anyone could cut it with a knife. So he decided to spill the tea on his Facebook. He allayed every fear and quenched the speculations around his health and somehow kept the critics quiet. It was killing two birds with one stone, and for the first time, it seemed that the old man had finally learned the PR move, even though he came late to the game at 50. While on the mend, speculations ran rife about the possibility of him stepping away from the spotlight and having the kids take up the mantle as the new Swamp Kings. But in September 2022, he was back with a bang, slinging shots and dominating the screens like he had been doing forever. But just when things started to look up, fate shook him up again, and this time, it's something more sinister than a back surgery. Not out of the woods. Yet again, the tide changes, and the Swamp King is caught under the current of something deeper than back pain. While he had undergone at least 4 surgeries to have his failing back restored to a working condition of some sort, more medical problems waited in the wings, almost looking to steal the spotlight from him completely. While critics had continued to watch that ginger in his steps with question marks around it, he had carefully avoided questions about it, drowning their speculations in a large pool of silence. But he couldn't escape this PR hell. Fans who had watched him on the mend from a back surgery could rarely point a finger at a new problem. But during an off-season in 2022, while he was on a break from swamp people, life wasn't done with him just yet. So in June of the same year, he revealed that he finally revealed the truth about his health. His prostate had been completely ravaged by cancer. For most fans, it was difficult hearing a man who wrestles control of the swamp from the jaws of 12-foot monster crocs getting chewed up inside by a force he can rarely fight. For the first time, sources close to him suggested that he felt what it meant to be truly powerless against another natural force. Having already gone under the knife multiple times, perhaps it would have been difficult for anyone else to see a way out of it all. But when an unstoppable force like cancer meets an immovable object like Troy, something had to give. He stared right at the jaws of danger many times in the swamp and came out alive, and he has been through multiple surgeries to get his back in shape again. What is one more surgery to a man like that? Knowing he wasn't out of the woods yet, he took the surgery head-on and had his prostate surgically removed. After a successful operation, it seemed that he had beaten another predator. Suddenly, he was back in the bayou, and with an obvious bounce in his steps, like a man who had just reclaimed his life. But no matter how much he tried, it just always seemed like something darker and even more predatory than his swamp adversaries was creeping up on him. And it was only a matter of time before they caught up. A few years after his surgery, it seemed that his health had taken a whole new turn. But what happens when a man finds the perfect but loses his closest allies? Troy can't catch a break. After his surgery in 2021 and finding his feet back in the bayou, life seemed at the best it could be at the time, until 2025, when the unthinkable happened. Imagine a man who had been through numerous surgeries to get his life back together, losing 2 close friends and partners in the same year. Well, Troy did not have to imagine it. That immediately became his reality. In July 2025, Junior Edwards, a superstar on Swamp People, gave up the ghost in the comfort of his house, losing the battle to colon cancer. Talking about cancer, Troy has been through that phase and survived. But sometimes, even some of the oldest war dogs cannot win every battle. No matter the experience, the grit, and that unbreakable will to live. But sometimes the will outlasts the body, and there is nothing anyone can do. Troy, who had known Junior nearly all of his life, could barely fathom what had happened. On his social media, he revealed just how much Junior's death threw him off his guard. But it wasn't just Junior who had passed on. the show had lost another elder in the bayou, the humorous Sterling Fryeau. Sterling was not exactly a mainstay like Junior, who appeared from season 1 to 6 on the show. Sterling only made cameo appearances, but every time he was on set, his presence was heavily felt. He had that rugged country boy humor and a smile to light up a room, and it didn't take very long for fans to have him as a favorite, especially for the calm he brought to the disturbing hunt for alligators. In a bid to pay some respect to him, Troy not only tried to sandwich his name together with Junior's in a joint tribute to him and Junior, who lost his life in the same year. In a recent episode of Swamp People, Troy and the recently married Picklewheat were struggling with getting their bait to float without sinking into the ocean. So he paid tribute to his old friend Sterling, using his hook-to-styrofoam method to keep the lines afloat. For long-term fans, most could immediately tell that the method was a deliberate tribute to good old Sterling. And just as suspected, the method worked like a charm, keeping the line afloat and making hunting easier. But as much as the death of his peers hurt him to the bones, there was something else in Landry's waters, threatening to hurt him even deeper than the loss of his old pals. This time, the tragedy hits closer to home. However, it wasn't about his own life this time. He was being plagued by the one thing that every father and grandfather tries hardest to protect: his family legacy. To Troy, the alligators were mostly a secondary addition to the Landry name. But what happens when nature tries to take the one thing he really cared about away from him? The legacy he fights for. Winning a fight consistently against one of nature's greatest predators is no mean feat, and that is exactly how he earned the King of the Swamp moniker. Somehow, he still had a firm hold on the swamp. However, his life behind the scenes was rapidly slipping away. His grandson, Crew, was diagnosed with end-stage liver cancer, ripping a whole new void into the family. Although Crew belonged to his stepson, Brandon Holitard, it didn't matter to Troy. Crew had a place in his heart, just like his dad. When Troy posted about the child on his social media page, he had been on a transplant waiting list for the past 6 months, but every month they waited felt like a few years had passed, throwing the family into some serious doubt about the future of the child. At least that much was obvious to fans, who had recognized the slight change in his approach. He was never the type to put his personal problems out in the open. Is it possible the Swamp King is in fear of losing a battle he couldn't dominate with a rifle? While the transplant wasn't indeed a cure for Crew, it was a lifelong treatment that could spare him some more time alive. So the Landry family shared a link for people to donate, and in a couple of months, they had enough to get the child to the hospital. Yet, the storm was barely over, as the liver was deemed not to be the right match, so he couldn't receive it. And just like that, they were right back where they started. However, in June 2025, they finally found the perfect match, and little Crew had a successful surgery. And in September 2025, Troy was back in the swamp, preparing for a new season, and Crew had a new lease of life. Although the fear for Crew's life remained a constant thorn in his heart, it wasn't the first time his name had been in peril. In 2024, the same image that he had been building for years was suddenly under some serious legal threat. Like every alligator hunter, his kills had to be tagged. It was a plan to put in place to avoid other hunters crossing into the basin where they do not have a license to hunt. But sometimes, a little greed, a little excitement, and a dire need to be the apex predator take over a hunter. And Troy was no different. After his little problem with the arthritis, he was charged on just 2 accounts: improperly tagged alligator and cutting a dead alligator from the line. Although the final ruling was not published, Rumor has it that he had to pay a fine. Having survived cancer, back surgeries, and the surgery for his grandson, Troy's legacy becomes clearer. Perhaps the alligators were the simplest battles he really had to fight. Do you think these difficulties played a part in forging Troy? Is there a chance that he finally steps away from the spotlight and lets his kids take the reins? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.